North Bethesda, White Flint area. So share my screen here again and get going. So I'll start with some development updates, things that I know, things that are either been approved or things that are coming. In terms of the meeting agenda, um, a little bit of mobility is only on the bikeway project. Update from Brenda Sandberg, colleague with Parks Department. Tom Lewis, if he's on this call, to hear from him. And then we'll wrap up with a presentation from a proposed project on Nebel. So again, thanks everyone for joining. Gonna just get going here in terms of sort of development, sort of things that the board has approved either prior to the summer break or since. So what's been approved, we anticipate sort of construction beginning in 24 would be excuse me, number 9 on this map, which is MHB Nebel, 162 unit multifamily development. Number 2 is Evolution Labs, which I have a couple more slides. We talked about it before. You've seen a presentation in the past. And then construction should be starting with, we should be seeing construction start next year for Grand Park Phase 1. Number 15 on this slide, which is Rose Village, we should be receiving maybe before Christmas a new plan from that developer / property owner, which is Wilco. Richard Cohen is the leader of that company, and it should be coming in under a limited sort of a compressed timeline, given its focus on affordable housing. Has not yet been submitted officially to the department, but we know it's going to be coming in likely before Christmas. So anyone have a question? You could either, when I finish this wrap up, you could either raise your hand or just unmute yourself. This is of Evolution Labs. 3-phase. First phase approval was granted by the board. Has not yet got a staging allocation request. So staging allocation request is the final approval that we grant for new development. So once that comes in, we'll really know that the property owner / developer really wants to move forward with building something. So we have that for MHB Nebel, as well as for Grand Park Phase 1. This is Grand Park Phase 1. Senior living, Silverstone developer. Everything is sort of being teed up for this to move forward. Wouldn't be surprised to see construction sort of beginning in January 24. Senior high-rise development right across the street from Pike and Rose for orientation. This is where the VOB Saab dealership was there for many years, right adjacent to Capital One, not too far from the conference center. Another one that's been approved prior has been going around several cycles, several years. North Bethesda Market 2, right near to the Whole Foods. North of that, not including the gas station at 305 and Nicholson, multi-phase project will have multifamily, some retail, and then eventually may build over the existing office that's there today on Woodglen with a China garden on the ground floor for orientation purposes. So we'll see if that gets going next year. In terms of switching a little bit to mobility projects, over the last calendar year, a variety of projects have been implemented, some by the state, including the buffered bike lanes on Old Georgetown Road, as part of the western workaround, the side path around near to Wall Local Park, and then obviously the protected bike lane along Town Road, essentially fronting Pike and Rose. So the next sort of bikeway improvement should be up and running next year, maybe first quarter of next year, is a project that been delayed for several months, probably more than a year, probably running 2 years by now. Is the Marinelli Road Bikeway project between Nebel and 55. So once that's in place, there's another portion of the bikeway network will be implemented within the planned area. And then another important, let me just pause on this and switch topics for 1 second. Another facility we anticipate, not a bikeway facility, but another public facility, is the fire station and some another housing project associated with that. That's in the works. They're probably going to get a little bit more daylight in 24. We have a meeting coming up on our calendars, at least planning staff calendars, regarding that. Not a fire station, but the housing component that's associated with that. And obviously this group, probably next year, will get more information, at least public facing information on that. And then this is my pivot to Brenda from Parks Department. So a couple of weeks ago, the planning board authorized the purchase of the Jamal property on Old Georgetown Road, right across the street from Pike and Rose. So it's part of the Grand Park development. We were able to get about a half an acre from that developer, which is shown here on this slide in terms of the green dot. And then Parks Department, they went ahead and purchased, after multiple negotiations with the property owner, to purchase that property. So I will stop talking now and ask if you have any questions on anything that I've presented so far, and then ask Brenda, if she's here, to go next. Is there any questions for me? I see any hands? I don't see any hands raised. Or anyone want to unmute themselves? All right, hearing none, I'll turn it over to my colleague, Parks Department colleague Brenda Sandberg, who does a lot of these real estate deals for the Parks Department. So Brenda, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Nkosi. I hope everyone's getting ready for Thanksgiving coming up quickly. The traffic was bad even today when I was out and about. I'm Brenda Sandberg. I am the real estate management supervisor within the Park Development Division. So we're a group of 3 or 4 people who work on taking care of our existing real estate portfolio, which is over 37,000 acres in the county, and then also acquiring new land where needed for new parks. And a lot of the focus these days is in building and buying the land we need to create the important urban parks, because traditionally we didn't have parks down there over the years. So I have a brief PowerPoint I'm going to share with you. Let's see, let me put that up there and let me hit the slideshow and see if that works. Can people see the slideshow? Are you seeing the, actually, let me exit the slideshow. I'm going to move this over here. We're going to close that. And I'm going to share a different screen. Forgive me. I'm going to now share the main screen that I'm on, and now see if I can, you know what, I may not be able to share it. I'm just going to do it this way. Can people see this slide?
Yep, we can.
Yep.
Okay, great. I'll just run through this pretty quickly. This was the open session planning board session that where the planning board voted approval. This is the PowerPoint we gave to them, and I thought I'd sort of run through that, so that might help give most of the basic information, and then I'm here to take any questions you might have. As you well know, you know where White Flint is located. I can skip that slide. As Nikosi said, this piece here, we have park planners and landscape architects who are working with the grand development to make sure that this piece, the Lot 2 dedication that's coming to the commission, will be designed as in an interim park condition. Open grass, appropriate stormwater management, some nice paths, so there's at least this will be functional but simple park starting early on. For a long time, as you know, from the White Flint Master Plan, the plan was to have a 1 to 2 acre civic green space. The particular property, it's controlled by Douglas Development. Again, it's titled to Jamal's Norman MCO LLC. That's part of the Douglas Development Corporation. It's just short of an acre, 0.93. Again, you know the zoning, probably CR 4.0, height 250, does front on Old Georgetown and on Banneker Street, which is always good for parkland. And again, you folks are very familiar with this area, but so I'm sure you know that has Pike and Rose, new development, as well as some low density commercial that still exists in the area. And again, most of you probably know this, but it's a 23,000 square foot building. It was built in 1969. It is in excellent condition, and it currently has 2 tenants, the piano store and a development company. As we've mentioned in our public memo on the item, there's a very strong policy rationale, and we've been working to acquire this property for over 2 years. The 2022 PROS, that's the Park Recreation and Open Space Plan, that is done every 5 years to meet requirements of the state, but outlines all parks policy and what we're doing and why. And then Thrive Montgomery. Again, the focus is on active parks and open spaces for growing dense communities such as your community, the White Flint / North Bethesda. The Energized Public Spaces Functional Master Plan was approved in 2018, and it proposed civic greens be in this location, and especially that it be surrounded by experience improvement areas. This area in gray means it's an area that, based on a data-driven calculation, there's fewer things to do within walking distance of a park from where people live, in the areas that are, I'm sorry, that's what the crosshatch is, the EIAs, the experience improvement areas. This is also in an equity serving area. The equities focus areas are considered on a much larger scale, so you can see across the railroad tracks there's an area identified as an EFA. The areas in gray are within walking distance of the EFAs, so this park is in a location where it would help not only alleviate a shortage of outdoor activities and amenities, but also within walking distance of an equity focus area. You're probably most familiar with the White Flint sector plan. As I mentioned already, the vision is to create the civic green, 1 to 2 acres, to be a central public space. You can see right there, that is where we have acquired this property. And again, the purposes for this park is to accommodate major outdoor activities, public events, gatherings, celebration. The intent is to activate the public space, to draw people from the surrounding developments, both commercial and residential, to participate. Also, given its location pretty close, only a couple of blocks from Wall Park, which is another block from the Josiah Henson Museum, we think this is a great opportunity in this park to at least have some interpretation of Josiah Henson to help improve visibility of the museum just a short block away. Again, you are familiar with what is going to happen here. What we negotiated with the developer and is being fine-tuned as we speak through the park construction permit is for the developer to build of the phase 1 of the Grand Park project to build an interim condition park that is designed so that along the edges here, it will easily integrate with the the Douglas development property. And the amenities for that interim condition will be open grass paths, benches. So there will be a public open space that people can use until we get through the periods of time we'll have to get through to get to a full 1.5 acre park. So we do not have a detailed park concept. After several years of negotiations, we just came to agreement on the amount and the contract I would say a couple of months ago. So a full-blown concept plan has not yet happened. There hasn't been time for that. But I'll mention about when public outreach will start to get public input and do that in the next slide. Typically, the signature amenity for one of our civic greens is a large green lawn that can serve all sorts of purposes. It might have a stage, it might not. It might have, the goal is to have an abundance of seating, a mix of sun and shade, interactive and educational, public art, and amenities to both support everyday use. So if somebody wants to get, food to go from one of the restaurants across the street, they have a nice green place where they can throw down a blanket and have a picnic. They can, toss a frisbee, do whatever they want, but it can also host these really big public events as well that will help bring the community together. So here's all the details. Again, our negotiated purchase price was $10.4 million. We are funding this park with a program open space grant. This is actually the first acquisition we're doing through the relatively new Legacy Urban Space program in the county CIP, the county capital budget. So one thing I imagine that I really want to explain to people is the implementation phasing in this case. This is a huge step forward for us to get to the point where we now have the property. And just so you know, we're going to closing in about 2 weeks. So the commission will own the property very quickly. There will be a post-closing phase that will be no more than 5 years long, hopefully much shorter than that. The tenants will remain in the building. The rent that they pay will support Parks Department management of the property. During that time, whether it's ideally 2 or 3 years, it could be a little longer, all depending on many factors. That will be the window within which our park planning staff and our design team within park development can start conducting outreach to the community, do all sorts of planning and design for what would be the interim park on the full 1.5 acres and or the ultimate park. Also during that period, plan and get ready to implement the demolition at the end of this phase, demolition of the building and of the pavement. In these kind of situations, we like to keep the building occupied and active and supporting businesses and supporting the economy until we are actually fully planned and ready to go to, we don't want to take the building down and the pavement out and just fence it off and have a fenced off piece of land. That doesn't do anybody in the community any good. So we want to be all ready to go with the design and the funding necessary to turn it into a park, even if it's an interim park that's fairly simple, before we say, all right, it's time to end the interim use. One of the key and the funding sources to do that outreach and planning, and also to get ready for the demolition, the rent revenue will be able to support some of that, and we might use some information from some of our what we call level of effort projects within the CIP. The interim park phase, given how expensive it might be to build like the really grand plan, beautiful, amazing signature park on this 1.5 acres, it might be the case that we have to sort of create an interim park condition on the new parcel. The CIP, meaning the capital costs, OBI is operating budget impact. So the operating budget impact for that interim park phase would be determined during that post-closing phase while we're doing design and figuring out what the costs are and then trying to find the money so we can then be ready to go at the end of the post-closing phase. And then an ultimate park phase where we'd actually do detailed facility planning and construction funding for a signature urban park again, the actual costs to be determined during the facility planning process. In an ideal world, we can go right from the post-closing phase to an ultimate park phase. But it all depends on funding availability in the capital budget. This park will have to compete with every other park project, and every park project has to compete with every other project that the rest of the county agencies CIP have. One key thing is to mention is that I mentioned no more than 5 years for this post-closing phase. That is a requirement of our program open space grant. We can have a temporary interim use of this private, of the continuing of the private businesses that cannot go beyond 5 years. So that sort of sets a timeline for us. It gives us it used to be it was zero. We had to buy the land, we had to kick out any private tenants, take down the buildings and start construction of the park immediately. These days they give a little more leeway, especially in these urban areas, because they know we can't really fund design and construction of a park until we know we have the land. And now finally we have the land. So now we can put it in the queue to start doing the rest of the design. The other thing is that I just wanted to point out is that we do have that mid-county park benefits payment. And a PDF is the name for an account within our CIP. We're not expecting huge amounts of funds to coming in there, but I believe there are at least 2, maybe it's just 1 development that has been approved by the planning board that has some of those PBPs due, and some of them are just beginning to come in. They don't, so they're not going to be the millions of dollars necessary to create, again, the signature urban park, but it's going to be money that can help support the outreach planning and design, as well as maybe interim park conditions. So we're looking forward to, as other development happens, as Nkosi was talking about, those funds coming in to the Parks Department to help support turning this site into a grand park. Anyway, and the planning board resolution, so that's not relevant. I will go back to the graphic here, and or I can just stop sharing the screen if everyone's familiar with the site, and I'm open for any questions.
If anyone has any questions for Brenda, please raise your hand or unmute yourself. If you, Abby.
Good evening. Thank you for your presentation, Brenda. It was great. I have a question about something you mentioned regarding stormwater management at the site. And I was wondering how that is going to be implemented, integrated, and what the timeline is for something like that.
Well, stormwater, any project that we build has to have the stormwater management to meet the impervious surface runoff from whatever we're building. For instance, when I mentioned it, it was relevant to the lot 2, the piece of land that's being built as the interim park. That's almost half an acre. There's a little in that diagram. There's a little, and again, that was from early, site plan. There was a small area that was going to treat stormwater, I believe, from the sidewalks, not from the road. That's not the park's parcel's job to treat the storm management, but I believe just to treat some of the runoff from the sidewalks and side paths, etc. In parks, there was a huge focus on doing bioretention and all sorts of other sort of quality, more natural looking, as well as more natural functioning stormwater management. So it's not just channelizing it and running it off, but it's also integrating the designs of the stormwater management into a park. So it makes it feel green and attractive, and it's not, oh, there's an ugly ditch there. So there's a huge amount of effort that goes into that. We end up in interesting situations sometimes too, where, so for instance, when it comes time to build a park on the Douglas development piece, it's 100% paved. It's 100% imperviousness. What we're going to build I don't know what the percent imperviousness is, but it's going to be a lot less than 100%. And that was built in the 1969. There was no stormwater management on that property at all. And I don't think I've seen any that was added in later. So so we work with DPS and other folks to meet state and county requirements for stormwater management, but there's a huge focus in parks, and our landscape architects are really amazing, working with our engineers within parks to design stormwater management that is attractive and contributes to the green natural feel of a park, and also serves the ecological function that it's supposed to do.
So just as a heads up to a resident of the area and somebody who spends a considerable amount of time in that general area, the Pike and Rose stormwater system, to put it mildly, is lacking. And a couple of those roads turn into rivers during storms and actually empty into your lot that you're developing. And that becomes a very saturated situation without adequate, I know you're only managing the sidewalks, but your site there is potentially also to be flooded, given what's going on literally upstream from you. And the runoff from that lot comes into the Luxman community, and it has devastating effects and consequences for the neighborhood, from the Old Farm Creek to the Blackwater infrastructure that runs alongside and underneath Old Farm Creek. So maybe in moving forward, I respect what you're saying about the sidewalks, but you might want to give some consideration to putting in a little bit more thought into managing the water that's coming onto your site from sites around you, because I've witnessed it. I've walked through it. I've trudged through the mud, the dirt, and everything on my way back from Pike and Rose on several occasions.
Well, I'll say two things to that. First, I will make sure to send an email to the to our landscape architect who's working on the park permit for, and it may be done already, on the park permit for the interim park being built by the Grand Park Development Group. Second, if anybody has photos or videos you've taken on your phones when you're out there and holy cow, there was a huge thunderstorm and look at what's happening here, that is really helpful to our engineers and other folks, because whether we may not be able to solve, if there's a huge problem when those thunderstorms happen, we may not be able to solve it on the total 1.5 acres for the whole community, but we need to know that that's there so we can try to address it and help out with it. If we turn the entire 1.5 acres into a big stormwater pond, then we wouldn't really have the urban park we want. So but that's really key information. And these days, with the more rain and more heavy downpours in short periods of time, it's really making a difference. I mean, things we built maybe 10 years ago to meet the standards for how much runoff, how many inches per hour in such a period of time, they're not adequate. They're just not adequate to meet some of these things. So especially in an area that's urban, if you're seeing that, well, what was designed and built for Pike and Rose may not be enough to treat the impervious surfaces in Pike and Rose anymore, that's really helpful information to us in parks. So I encourage people. I don't know if you can see my email for my being invited on this, but if Nikosi can share my email address with you, if you folks have pictures, videos, or I remember when there was that huge thunderstorm that did X a year or two ago, whatever, that's really good information that helps us.
I have the videos, and I agree with you. The stormwater management of just a couple of years ago, 5-10 years ago, it's a quantity management issue, not a quality over time management issue. And that's what we're running up against right now. And future planning should be taking into account NOAA data when it comes to these particular events, because they are substantial and they are over shortened periods of time. And the quantity of water in that area is really, it's unbelievable. So yes, I have all of the, I have the photos, I have the videos, and I have everything that you just asked for.
Wonderful. Please, please. We have our engineering staff in the Park Development Division. They spend a huge amount of their time on the stormwater and on stream restoration as well. I mean, they're experts in stream restoration projects for natural streams, and so they're always looking for things that we can do. And for information, if we're going to build a great signature urban civic green, we don't want to build something that's going to get washed away the next time there's one of these unexpected 1 in 1,000 year floods. Any other questions?
All right. I don't hear any voices or see any hands. So Brenda, thank you for coming. If you could share that presentation with me, that would be great. So I could share it with all the folks who are not part of the call this evening.
Absolutely.
So thanks again. You could stick around, or you could just get prepared for Thanksgiving. So
I think I should go. Technically, I'm supposed to go leave this week, but that's not happening.
Well, thanks for making time for us. We do appreciate it. So thanks again.
Right. Thank you.
Next up on the agenda, take care, is Tom Lewis. Tom, are you on this call? All right. If Tom is not here, I know you accepted a meeting. We will go to Heather Delpolsky, who was the attorney for 11800 Neville. So Heather, the floor is yours.
Great. Can you hear me okay?
Can. Mm-hmm.
Great. Perfect. Always want to check. Well, good evening, Heather Delpolsky. I am the land use and zoning attorney for the project. I'll be very brief because nobody actually usually wants to hear from the land use and zoning attorney. You want to hear from the applicant and the design team. And I say applicant loosely because we are super early on in the process. They're not yet an applicant. We are just beginning our community outreach process. We actually just met with MNCPPC at the end of last week. And so now this is the first of our community meetings, and we've reached out to a number of others, including Pike District Partnership, West Montgomery County Citizens Advisory Board, Randolph Civic Association. We're happy to meet and discuss with anyone. Our plan is that after doing the community outreach, we would file a concept plan application with MNCPPC, as I'm sure many of you know because you're well versed in these issues. That is a non-binding application that's just designed to elicit feedback and comments as part of the early on review process. And then we would look to file subsequent development applications after that. I will, just in the interest of efficiency, let each of our team members introduce themselves as they begin to speak. So I will turn it to Don Nuzio, who is with the eventual applicant, TM Associates. I guess I would just say too, under zoning, I know Brenda covered this well on her project. The site is a CR zone. It's CR3, C1.5, R2.5, H200, and the housing that we're proposing here fits well within the zoning parameters, but we can definitely get into any more sort of zoning nerd details or questions during Q&A. But I will turn it to Don now, and then Rob is the exciting part. He's our architect who will take us through the presentation after some opening remarks from Don.
Thanks, Heather. My name is Don Nuzio. I'm the Vice President of Development at TM Associates Development out of Rockville, Maryland, just 15 minutes up the road from the subject site. Joining me today is also my President of Development, Adam Stockmaster. And Rob, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Don. Are you able to share screen?
Yes.
Okay. Great. Good evening, everyone. My name is Rob McLennan. I'm a partner with Mode 4 Architecture located in King Street in Old Town, Alexandria. I'll move through this relatively quickly, and I know we can answer any questions that come up at the end of the presentation. Don, if you could go to the beginning of the presentation. We've given away the reveal here. Next slide. This is just a quick overview of the site. Next slide. Some aerial views as well. I think you're all familiar with the site. Next slide, Don. Some of the street views showing the existing building and the recent residential tower in the distance. This is looking north on Neville Street. Looking across the street at the Washington Gas facility that's directly across from our site. Next slide. This is a transit plan that we just wanted to show. We do have a proximity to the metro. Within a half mile, probably a 10-minute walk from Neville Street, and then there also is a bus line directly adjacent to us, which is that green dot right there that runs and connects to Wisconsin, or Rockville Pike, excuse me. Next slide. Site plan just shows the overall building footprint, how it relates to Neville Street, how we are proposing. There's 2 existing curb cuts on the site that exist today. We're going to close the southern one, and we're going to relocate the northern one slightly further north to create a drive aisle, a 20-foot drive aisle, which would be both for residential car parking and for the loading dock as well. And I'll show you where those are when we get to the more detailed plans. We are proposing 3 parking spaces at the entrance of that. Those would be basically delivery spaces and spaces for other, like Uber drivers and things like that, to be there temporarily. We are now, next slide, Don. Let's go to the next slide. This shows we have a full level of semi underground parking. So this is located typically about 4 or 5 feet below the existing grade. And we are proposing 73 total parking spaces, 80% which would be full size and 20% would be compact. You can also see the areas in blue represent our electric room, our mechanical rooms. And then you can also see off of the entry aisle our loading bay. This would be a 12 by 30 foot loading bay. So that's large enough for a typical U-Haul truck to go completely inside the building with a roll-up door that is also directly adjacent to our trash room. So internal trash with a compactor, that would all be accessed through the loading. And then you can see how that entry drive then leads to the parking garage itself. So all of that is out of sight from Neville Street. Next slide, Don. Our ground floor is a mixture of amenity spaces and residential units. I think we have 14 residential units on this floor. The amenity spaces include a generous lobby, a leasing office, a 750 square foot community room with an associated sort of show kitchen. We also have bike storage on this floor, so that would lead directly from bike storage directly out to Neville Street. We are trying to promote bike use within this development. Then there is also a raised area. You come in the lobby at basically ground level, and then there's a raised area about 4 feet up, which would contain a business center and sort of so we call it the living room, which would be a lounge area for the residents, and a fitness area. The lounge area also opens directly onto an amenity terrace, which sits above our garage, which is that shape there. And that also connects directly to a triangular piece of land at the rear of the site, which we would be programming with, tot lot, barbecue pit. We haven't gotten into the landscape detail of that, but that's seen as an amenity for the residents that would connect inside, outside, spaces. Next slide, Don. Typical floor plan. So this would be floors 2 through 7. We have 23 units per floor. You can see we've color coded the units. We have a mix of 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, 3 bedrooms, and 4 bedrooms. 20% of the units are 1 bedroom, 49% are 2 bedroom, and then I think it's 15% are 3 bedroom, and the other remaining 14% are 4 bedrooms. So you do see a lot of what we call family style units in this building, especially the 4 bedrooms and the 3 bedrooms. Next slide. Just an overview image showing the building as it relates to its context. You can see the 14-story building to the right, and our 7-story building in the foreground along Neville Street. Next slide. These are just some preliminary renderings. As Don mentioned, we are in kind of a concept phase, and Heather said it as well. But these are some of the images. We're still working through some color iterations. But the general idea of the building, it's a 7-story building. We would have a ground floor that would again contain these amenity spaces with basically storefront systems that would activate Neville Street. And then the units themselves, the ground floor of the units would be about 5 feet above the sidewalk to give kind of a privacy that you're not looking directly into the unit. But those units would help also to activate it. Within the building itself, we're proposing a frame system, which is that gray area, which rises from the 2nd floor to the 6th floor. And then contained within that would be a panelized system that would have inset balconies and also other windows you'll see in other renderings. And then the 7th floor would be an attic story that would then cascade down, as you see here, at the ends of the building and also at the entry. Next slide, Don. This is the entry. We're still working through this. We want to actually, based on our comments we received from the county staff, we're going to actually enlarge the amount of paving area here and add some benches for residents and guests to sort of have a space to stop and wait for an Uber or whatever. So this would be the entry system to the building. We do propose a canopy. Next slide, Don. Overall this is more looking toward the north. You can see the entry bay, if you will, is recessed to allow for more landscaping in front of it. And then we do create sort of a vertical, we have these 3 vertical window bays that add a vertical accents to the entrance. Next slide. And just some other images of the building showing the overall composition. Next slide. So, and I think that's it. That's all we have for tonight. So I'm available to answer questions as well as Heather and Don.
Yeah. And I think we didn't actually mention the total unit count, and obviously everybody could see that it was 7 floors, but it's I believe we're proposing up to 152 multifamily residential units. And maybe Don, do you want to just talk a little bit about the of like the goals of the development? I would say sort of the affordability and what we're looking to do here for the housing community.
Sure. Thanks, Rob. Thanks, Heather. So this 152 unit community represents TM Associates investment of over $80 million into the North Bethesda community, which will cover households across the 30 to 80% AMI income band. So we truly believe this is an attainable integrated housing community and a new construction opportunity that can help a lot of the commuter base, commuting in and out of the city, not only throughout Rockville, but also into the district, Arlington, things along those lines with the close vicinity to the metro. Adam, are there other more top level general comments you want to bring up on this call?
No, not at this time. Just love to receive some feedback from the group if anyone has any questions for us.
Questions from anyone? Raise your hand or unmute yourself.
Yes, and Kosi, while we're waiting to see if anybody wants to type anything into the chat or raise their hands, I could just mention, again, we are early in the process, and after we go through concept plan, we would then move to what you all are familiar with, sketch plan, preliminary plan, and site plan, which are the binding applications that actually go to public hearing at the planning board. So I did want to say, because we are so early and things may evolve, we are definitely happy to meet with the implementation committee again at the time of sketch, preliminary plan, and site plan, and to provide any updates. And of course, you all can always reach out to us with any questions.
Can you explain the income band discussion? What you're talking about in terms of income?
Yeah, sure. That's not a problem. So when I say the 30 to 80% AMI ranges, so from a 1-person household, this would range as far down as somebody making an annual income of $38,500 a year to a 4-person family of upwards of $110,000 per year. So when we're looking at a full integration, we're combining a variety of income types across that broad range.
Okay, thank you.
To the comment that somebody wrote about the name, as Heather said before, we are in very early concept stages based off of potential approvals and process with MNC PPC as it relates to speed to market. We'd be targeting approximately Q3 2025 closing. So, open to hear, any creative ideas, thoughts, or feedback as we, assemble some of the pieces here. But it is on top of our mind to come up with a name that reflects the area we're building in the near term.
The
Done.
100
Oh.
of the 152 units, how many will be part of the county's MPDU program or workforce program? Could you talk anything about that? At this
Sure.
time?
Yeah. So we are currently proposing 100% of the platform will be generated towards Montgomery County's MPDU program. That is our full intent. We are going to be working with various officials from the county to make sure this becomes a reality. But it has started out of the gate as 100% MPDU.
Anything that answers one of Krista Bricks's questions in the chat? Any other questions from folks at this time? As Heather noted, they'll come back later on down the road once a formal submission will be submitted. So if you don't have any questions tonight, that's fine. We could deal with any other questions down the road. So, Heather, could you share this presentation with me so I could send it out to the larger group of folks that are not here this evening? Just shared with them after Thanksgiving. So, anything else you, Heather, and your team, you want to leave with the committee and other folks this evening before we see you next time down the road?
I think that's it. I always say, and I know Don thinks the same thing, early and often on anything that we're working on. So we are here early, and we're happy to be here often as there's updates to provide. And of course, Nkosi and frankly, I think probably a lot of folks who are on this meeting have my contact information, and we're certainly happy to answer any questions or respond to anyone as we go through the process. So please don't hesitate to reach out. But we definitely will, of course, be back with you when we go to sketch preliminary site. And Nkosi, I'll get the presentation from tonight over to you.
Thank you. I think stormwater management has always been an issue here.
Right, we heard that.
And
yeah.
I think we'll anything you could focus on in terms of next time you come back to sort of have a more in-depth discussion on that particular topic, I think will be helpful.
Yep, no, we certainly heard that concern, and I don't live far from here, and I have tried to cross the streets in White Flint and Pike and Rose during heavy rainstorms, and it's definitely chaos.
All right, well, thank you again, and I don't see any hands or any other comments in the chat, so thank you for coming, and
I
have
think
a
I
fabulous...
just did see another comment come in, or a question rather, come into the chat about parking.
Oh, sure. I can field this one. Based off the 100% MPDUs, the approved parking for our site, which Rob and Heather have been working with our team on, is a 0.5 to 1 ratio. With 152 parking spaces, we are able to meet the 76 by right, which would meet that criteria. Additionally, based off of the activation towards Neville Street and Marinelli, within a half-mile walking distance of the metro, as well as other resources such as the bus, such as ride sharing, and also the bike storage on site, we believe we're going to have a very good intermodal program that can, help people walk, bike, or drive to work.
Yeah, just to note that the zoning ordinance allows MPDUs to be parked at 50% of the typical rate. So just underscoring what was just stated. I don't see any other chat questions. I don't see any raised hands. So again, thank you for coming, and have a fabulous Thanksgiving.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, sure.
Thanks,
Thanks for
Thank
making the time on, I know, a busy week to spend some time with the committee to discuss this plan that's in its infancy. And we'll see you guys down the road. So thanks again.
Thank you. Take care, everyone. Have a nice evening.
All right, take care. So finally, I don't think Tom Lewis is with us, so I'll just note in terms of open the floor in terms of any questions from anyone, any particular topics for folks to put on the table? All right, hearing none. I mentioned the fire station and housing, which will come a bit more daylight, public daylight on that, likely in January or February of next year. But we're beginning to sort of move the ball on that project that will eventually deliver a new fire station and emergency medical services to the North Bethesda area, sort of expanding the services that are not too far away in the city of Rockville. So, so if there are no other questions, I will say thank you for jumping on this call, participating, and we will be in touch regarding future meetings for 2024 in terms of continued virtual or switching to in-person, which we haven't done in like 3 years now. So, because most of these meetings before were all done in person at Walt Local Park, or years ago at the Platinum Apartment when we were in Silver Spring. So with that, so have a fabulous Thanksgiving. And if there are any things that happen between now and Christmas, you will be alerted of. And otherwise, thanks again, and stay well and dry tomorrow. And any other things planning or planning adjacent related, just reach out to me or some of the other folks on this call, like Andrew Bossy with MCDOT or Tom with the county exec's office, or some of the other partners that we all sort of interact with. I should note finally that Pete Fosselman, who's with the regional services director for Bethesda, North Bethesda, etc., is calling together sort of a working group regarding to look at the Lux Manor area regarding stormwater management issues with Department of Environment. I know Abby and others will be part of that. So that's sort of something else that's happening on the back burner. It's not yet moved out regarding a formal meeting has not yet been established, but that's coming. So with that final word, again, thanks everyone for jumping online and have a fabulous Thanksgiving. So see you next time.
Appreciate it.
Thank
Take care.
you.
Good night.
Good night. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you.